Hello, and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to talk about mystical powers. We're all fascinated by someone who has mystical powers. And in fact, anything that is mystical or appears mystical is very fascinating to us. I remember the first time I held a cell phone, or even the first time I sat in front of a computer. It seemed magical. And can you imagine what it's like to be able to deal with a new technology, AI coming in, and you look at all that stuff it can do and you're like so impressed. You're like, wow, this is magical. And there's a lot that went into that technology. Then there are people who can do magical things. I mean, yes, there are magicians, but then there are people who can heal the sick or bring the dead back to life. There are people who can walk on water or not be killed by snakes. Or even some who can magically make a watch or even ash appear. And when we hear of such people, we become curious. This person seems to have supernatural powers. Many are attracted to this person. Many followers arise, and many begin to believe that this person must be God. But is the power to perform miracles a symptom of God? After all, aren't miracles happening around us all the time? Our body and mind are a miracle. The way the sun, moon, tides, and seasons operate is also miraculous. The wide array of species all over the planet are among the miracles that we take for granted. Then why are we so impressed by the small miracles presented to us by human beings? Why do we think that supernatural acts must be the work of a God? Thousands of years ago, and to this day, yogis in India have learned how to have siddhis, or miraculous powers. The 8 classical siddhis are anima, the ability to reduce one's body to the size of an atom; mahima, the ability to expand one's body to an infinitely large size; laghima, the ability to become weightless or lighter than air; garima, the ability to become heavy or dense; prapti, the ability to get whatever one desires; prakamya, the ability to access any place in the world, to go there instantly; ishitva, the ability to control all material elements or natural forces; and vashitva, the ability to force your influence upon anyone. Now imagine if you had these abilities, how powerful you would be. And imagine if you had all 8 of them, how much incredibly powerful you'd be. And how envious people would be of you. And how people might put you on a pedestal and think of you as a god. These are the siddhis, the capabilities that the human organism is capable of. We all have these capabilities. But we haven't learned the science behind them. We haven't learned how to utilize these powers and abilities that are naturally within us. It takes a certain kind of discipline, a certain kind of practice. But coming to the point of, does that make us God? And no, that wouldn't be true, because regular yogis who have practiced this for many, many years, of course, and done great austerities and penances to be able to arrive to have these mystical powers, they're not God. They're just living entities like you and I who've developed a particular ability. So why do we confuse such a person with God or a God? If someone is actually God, the miracles that they can perform are far beyond these yogic powers. Today we're going to see the incredible miracles performed by Krishna. Even the creator of the entire universe, Brahma, was bewildered. So one day, Krishna decided to take his breakfast as a picnic in the forest. Instead of sitting at home and having breakfast, why not have a picnic? And so he woke up early in the morning This is Krishna as a 5-year-old boy, okay? Woke up early in the morning and blew his bugle horn and woke up all the cowherd boys and calves with its beautiful sound. Hundreds of cowherd boys came out of their homes and joined Krishna. So this is in the village of Vrindavan, right? Hundreds of them joined him, along with thousands of calves, and they headed towards the forest. The boys were very beautiful, and they were equipped with lunch bags and bugles and flutes and sticks for controlling the calves. So because the young boys were in charge of the calves, the elder men and so on took care of the cows. This was a village and primarily centered around a dairy community. This is the village of Vrindavan, which exists till this day in India. All right, so when they reached the forest, all the boys began to play and sport. I think it behooves us to take a look at what this was all like. It was so much of fun and excitement and all of that. Let's take a look. So they're all going off into the forest. Please feel free to write your comments as you're watching and listening to all of this. Krishna and Balaram, along with the babies, the calves, and all their friends. Right? So when they reached the forest, all the boys began to play and sport. And although their mothers had decorated them with ornaments of pearls and precious stones and gold, when they went into the forest, they further decorated themselves with fruits and green leaves and bunches of flowers and peacock feathers and soft minerals. They would steal one another's lunch bags. And when a boy came to understand that his bag had been taken away, the other boys would throw it even further away to a more distant place. And those standing there would throw it even further. And when the owner of the bag became disappointed and cried, the other boys laughed, and then they finally returned his bag. Sometimes Krishna would walk away from them and go to a somewhat distant place to see the beauty of the forest. Then all the other boys would run to accompany him, each one saying, "I shall be the first to run and catch Krishna. I shall touch Krishna first." In this way, they enjoyed life by repeatedly touching Krishna. So they were obviously fascinated by Krishna. But you must notice that even though Krishna is spoken of as the supreme being, the supreme creator of all universes and all beings, he's here as a child, enacting these pastimes with his friends. And these friends are longing to touch him, to hold him. They're stealing each other's lunch bags. They're playing with each other in mischievous ways. And Krishna is part of that. There's no formality between them. There's no sense of great and small. There's no fierce God sitting on a throne in heaven somewhere trying to send people off to heaven or hell. God is the most playful, fun-loving, and beautiful being of all. So all the boys were differently engaged. Some blew their flutes, while others blew bugles made of horn. Some imitated the buzzing of bumblebees, and others imitated the voice of the cuckoo. Some imitated flying birds by running after birds' shadows on the ground, and some imitated the beautiful movements and attractive postures of the swans. Some sat down silently with the ducks, while others imitated the dancing of the peacocks. Some boys attracted young monkeys in the trees, while some jumped into the trees, imitating the monkeys. Some made faces as they imitated the monkeys, while others jumped from one branch to another. Some went to the waterfalls and crossed over the river, jumping with the frogs. And when they saw their own reflections in the water, they would laugh. They would also condemn the sounds of their own echoes. In this way, the cowherd boys would play with Krishna, who is the source of the universe and the light, the Brahman effulgence, the light that the impersonalists want to merge into. He is the supreme personality of Godhead for devotees who understand that the perfection of life is to serve him eternally. And for ordinary persons, he's just another ordinary child. The cowherd boys had accumulated the karmic results of pious activities of many, many lifetimes and were now able to associate with the Supreme Godhead as his childhood friends. How can one explain their great fortune? I want you to imagine, what if you had such great fortune? What if you could do the things that can be done so that you can have this incredible fortune to be with God? Write down in the comments what it would be like for you. What if you could be in a relationship like this, enjoying the most wonderful, most glorious, most transcendental pastimes with God? I want you to reflect on your own life. What would it be like for you? Write it in the comments. I'd love to read what your thoughts are, what your feelings are. You see, yogis may undergo difficult and severe austerities for many, many births by practicing yam, niyam, asana, and pranayam. If you've heard of the yogic process, these are the different things that yogis practice. And yet in course of time, when these yogis attain the perfection of controlling the mind, they will still be unable to taste even a particle of dust from the lotus feet of the Supreme Godhead. I'm not saying this. This is being spoken by the great sage Shukadev to the king Parikshit. This is his narrative. And he's trying to explain to us how rare and extraordinary this event is. So he says, when yogis cannot even attain even a particle of dust from the lotus feet of the Supreme Godhead, Krishna, then what can be said of the great fortune of these inhabitants of Vrindavan with whom Krishna, the Supreme Godhead, personally lived and who they saw face to face and interacted with him in various pastimes every single day? Now, on this particular day, there appeared in the forest a great demon named Aghasura. And we've talked about these demonic kind of creatures coming to kill Krishna. You see, Krishna had been predicted that he was going to kill the great king Kans who lived at that time. He was terrorizing the world. He was a cruel, vicious, you think of Hitler and think of many times Hitler. Someone who was absolutely a demonic person ruling as a king. And when he got to know that this boy has been born, Krishna, who will kill him, he tried to send various demonic beings to try and kill Krishna, beings that he could trust. He knew that they were powerful, who had got great abilities and siddhis and things that they could do. So one of them was Aghasura. Now these demonic characters, beings like you and I, they could take any shape that they wanted. So Aghasura came in the shape of a gigantic snake. Aghasura had been sent by Kans. He was the younger brother of Putana and Bakasura, who had been killed by Krishna. Let me go over to some pictures of that. So Bakasura, and I think we saw if you were there last week, but if not, then I'll show you some pictures again. This was Bakasura, who had been killed by Krishna. Again, another very demonic entity who had come in this particular shape and form. He'd taken on this as if he was going to try to kill Krishna and his friends like this. And we had Putana earlier. And baby Krishna. Krishna was a tiny little baby at that time, just a few months old. And he'd killed Putana like that. So this person who now appeared, Aghasura, he was the younger brother of Putana and Bakasura. And when he appeared in the shape of a gigantic snake. So, and of course he'd been sent by King Kans. Basically, he was very angry. And the sound of Krishna and the cowherd boys playing in the forest made him very agitated. Here they were, they had killed his brother and they had killed his sister And here they were having fun and playing, and he's like, what the hell? Where am I going to get these guys? I'm going to show them, how powerful I am, right? This Krishna has killed my sister and brother, Putana and Bakasura, and therefore I shall kill Krishna along with all the other cowherd boys. By killing them, I will make an offering for the departed souls of my brother and sister. Their parents who are attached to them will also die due to attachment for their sons. So this was Aghasura's resolve. He then assumed the form of this huge python, which was as tall as a big mountain and as long as 8 miles. Having assumed this wonderful python body, he spread open his mouth like a big cave and lay down on the road, expecting to swallow Krishna and the boys. You know how crocodiles do that? Even pythons do that? Yeah, so that's what he was doing here. And let's take a look at that. So that's Aghasura, and Krishna is standing there. He knows what's going on, but his friends are all rushing towards the snake. They're rushing towards the snake's mouth, thinking this is something for them to play with. And Krishna's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I know what's happening, but my friends don't understand. Or maybe they did understand. And they just trusted Krishna to protect them. So it says that Aghasura's lower lip rested on the surface of the earth and his upper lip was touching the clouds in the sky. The borders of his mouth resembled the sides of a big cave in a mountain, and the middle of his mouth was as dark as possible. His tongue resembled a broad highway, and his breath was like a warm wind. His eyes blazed like fire. Upon seeing this demon's wonderful form, which resembled a great python, the boys thought it must be a wonderful scenic spot in Vrindavan. I've seen things like this, like in parks sometimes they have these kind of characters they create, and you sort of play with them. I remember one place where they'd taken the Humpty Dumpty character and they'd created that, and then you slid through his mouth and out of his tongue. As kids, we love doing stuff like that. And similarly, they make other characters out of plants and so on. Anyway, so the boys wondered, is this creature dead, or is it actually a living python with its mouth spread wide just to swallow us all? After some discussion, they concluded, this is certainly an animal that is sitting here to swallow us all. Its upper lip resembles a cloud reddened by sunshine. The corners of his mouth resemble mountain caves. And the high mountain peaks we see, those must be his teeth. His tongue resembles a broad highway, and the inside of his mouth is very dark. The hot, fiery wind is the breath coming out of his mouth, which is giving off a bad smell of burning flesh because of all the dead bodies he has eaten. Has this creature come to swallow us? If he does so, he'll immediately be killed, like Bakasura, without delay. Now, here's where you begin to understand the thinking of these boys. They had complete trust. Krishna had killed Bakasura. He had killed all the other demons that had come to kill him, even though he was now only 5 years old. But ever since he was a baby, he was being attacked. And he had protected not only himself, but also everybody in the village. So they had complete trust in him. And that's one of the big takeaways for me, is as we begin to understand and build a relationship with the divine, with God, we begin to understand that we're not alone in this world, that we're taken care of, that we're protected, that we're safe, that no matter what happens, nothing can harm us. You may say, oh yeah, it's just some faith you have, it's just some belief you have. I say, no, it's very scientific. We are spiritual beings, first and foremost. We are souls in this body. So even if this body perishes, even if this body is hurt, the soul will never be hurt. And so philosophically speaking, we can never be hurt or damaged. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the soul cannot be cut by any weapon. It cannot be burned by fire. It cannot be destroyed by anything at all. It is indestructible. So that's at the soul level, of course. But even in physical form, Krishna protects his devotees. When you have a relationship with him, that he's there. It's a living, vibrant relationship. But you may say, well, I don't have a relationship. Well, relationships are made. You make a relationship with someone. You like somebody, a friend, a person, someone you want as your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, or you want to make a friend or a buddy. Well, you reach out to them and you say, hey, I'd love to get to know you. And you make friends with them. And that's kind of how it works. And if you want to make friends with God, that's how that works too. It's not some mystical, magical thing. It's not that some special people can do it. Everybody is welcome to the party. There's no discrimination here. And it's not that, God has some favorites. It's not that people of one religion are more part of God and others are not. No, everybody's welcome. Everybody. You think you don't like him as Krishna, you like him as something else? Well, go right ahead. It doesn't make a difference. Shakespeare said it beautifully. He said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So it doesn't matter. You want to call him Allah, you want to call him Jehovah, you want to call him any other name, go right ahead. Krishna, on the other hand, when you examine his activities, his pastimes, you begin to understand what God looks like, what God does, what it is to be with God. What does it mean to love God? What does it mean to trust him? What does it mean that he's got your back? It's not some mystery anymore. It's something you can tangibly see and experience for yourself. All right, getting back to our story here. So they have complete trust. They have no doubt that Krishna is going to protect them. Krishna was watching this. He's in the core of everyone's heart. He's in the energy of the universe. He's in everyone's heart, and he exists as a being. So because he knows what's going on in their heart, he knows what they're talking. He knows that this creature is actually a demon who has taken the form of a giant python. So Krishna knew this and tried to stop his friends, but the boys had already entered into the demon's mouth. The demon, however, did not swallow them. He was thinking of his relatives who had been killed by Krishna, and he was waiting for Krishna to enter his mouth. When Krishna saw that all the coward boys, who did not know anyone but him as their protector, had entered like straws into the fire of the abdomen of Aghasura, the demon, who was death personified, it was intolerable for Krishna to be separated from his friends. And that's a beautiful statement here. It is intolerable for Krishna to be separated from his friends. Can you imagine the love that he has for his friends? What to say of his friends have for him? And for a moment, Krishna was struck with wonder and unsure of what to do. What was to be done? How could both the killing of this demon and the saving of his beloved friends be performed simultaneously? Krishna, being unlimitedly potent, decided to wait for the right moment, and then he entered the mouth of Aghasura himself. Now, the audience to this whole scene was actually all the devas, the demigods from throughout the universe. They were watching. They could watch from where they were millions of miles away, and they could see what was going on over here. And when they saw Krishna entering the mouth of the demon Aghasura, they exclaimed with fear, "Oh no, oh no, how is this going to work out?" But the friends of Aghasura, like Kans and other demons who were also remotely watching, were jubilant. Once Krishna entered the mouth of the demon, he entered his throat. And in his throat, he began to enlarge himself. And as Krishna increased the size of his body, the demon extended his own body to a very large size, as much as he could. But at some point, he became choked, and his breathing stopped, and he suffocated. And his eyes rolled here and there and then popped out. The demon's life air could not pass through any outlet, and therefore it finally burst out through a hole in the top of his head. Then Krishna glanced over the dead calves and cowherd boys and brought them back to life. So they were all inside now in the body of the great serpent, the Aghasura. And he glanced over them and brought them back to life. Krishna is also called Mukunda, the one who gives liberation from the cycle of birth and death. That's why he's called Mukunda. And he came out of the demon's mouth with his friends and calves. At the same time, from the body of the gigantic python, a bright light, a glaring effulgence came out, illuminating the sky in all directions, until Krishna came out from the corpse's mouth. Then all the demigods looking on saw this effulgence entered into the body of Krishna. The demigods began to shower flowers, the celestial dancing girls began to dance, and the Gandharvas, who were famous for singing, offered songs of prayer. The drummers began to beat their kettle drums, and the Brahmins offered Vedic hymns. Of course, all this was happening in a way that could not be seen to human eyes. But the point was that in both the heavens and on earth, everyone began to glorify the Supreme Lord. Now, Brahma is known to be the creator of the universe, heard this wonderful ceremony accompanied by music and sounds of Jai, Jai Shri Krishna, and immediately came to see what was going on. On seeing so much glorification of this little boy, Krishna, he was completely astonished. Who the heck is this? And why is everyone praising him? So it's very important to understand what happened. That light that emerged from the body of Aghasura was his soul emerging. And what happened to that soul is that Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, took that into his own being. He allowed that soul to merge within himself and gave to this demonic character liberation from the cycle of birth and death. In time, the python-shaped body of Aghasura dried up into merely a big skin. It became a wonderful place for the children and the inhabitants of the village of Vrindavan to visit, and it remained so for a long time. The incident of Krishna saving himself and his friends from death and giving deliverance to Aghasura, who had assumed the form of a python, took place when Krishna was 5 years old. But it was disclosed to their families after 1 year, as if it had taken place on that very day. So this is a very unusual thing that I'm saying here now. Listen carefully. Krishna was 5 years old when this happened, but it was disclosed to their families, the boys and their families, after 1 year, as if it took place on that very day. Okay, this is a very mysterious statement here, and there's a whole story behind this. Let's get into that. It says here, Krishna is the cause of all causes. See, the cause of all causes. This is a tremendous expression which says, Ishvara Parama Krishna. This is from the prayers of Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachit Ananda Vigraha. Krishna has a form that is eternal, that is full of knowledge and full of bliss. It is eternally blissful. And he is Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. See, everything has a cause in this world, cause and effect, right? But what is the cause of all causes? What is the cause behind everything? And that is God. But what does that mean? Does that mean that God does everything in the world? No, God does nothing. Krishna says very clearly, I do nothing. At the same time, I'm always doing things to be able to act in this world. So there's a mystery here. As such, he doesn't do everything. The things that are happening in the world, that are happening in our lives, are the result of our own karma, our own actions and reactions. However, despite being part of our karma, he is the facilitator of the entire system. He is the facilitator that allows us to breathe, the facilitator that allows us to be alive, the facilitator that allows this universe to function, and that has set up the system of karma and everything else that is going on out here. So therefore, he is the cause behind the cause. So you get it? The cause of all causes. The causes and effects of the material world are all created by him, for he is the supreme controller. This is an interesting statement, the supreme controller. We all want to control, don't we? And when we don't have control, we feel scared, we feel anxious, we feel fearful, because we seem to be out of control. If our life was out of control, if our mind was out of control, if anything, our children, our car, our house, anything was out of control, we would be terrified. But he is the supreme controller. And the tendency to want to control comes from him. And when we recognize that in fact nothing is under our control, the next breath is not under our control. We don't have control even over our breath. Right now you can breathe. But if that breathing decided to stop, that's it. It's over. The heart decided to stop, finished. We couldn't do anything about it, right? So Who is the controller behind everything? That is Krishna. And this same Krishna appeared as the son of Nanda and Yashoda by his causeless mercy. He then exhibited wonderful pastimes as a child to captivate the hearts and minds of his beloved devotees. Now he was exhibiting great mercy on this most sinful miscreant Aghasura, who had appeared as a gigantic snake and wanted to kill Krishna and his friends. And Krishna, by his mercy, had elevated this Aghasura, this demon, to become one of his associates. The demon received sarupya mukti, that is liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and attainment of a form similar to Krishna himself, to Vishnu actually. Sarupya mukti, having the same form as the divine. A form that is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Such spiritual advancement is factually impossible for materially contaminated persons to attain. And yet, by his blessings, Krishna elevated him. Why is that? Because people like Aghasura, people who hate God, people who want to kill God, people who are filled with hate in their heart, if they take that hate and they direct it towards God, they will get the same benefit as someone who loves God. That might seem like an absolutely bizarre statement to make, but the truth is that hate is a very powerful meditation. When you hate someone, you can't stop thinking about them. And when you love someone, you can't stop thinking about them either. And so Krishna says, always think of me, become my devotee, surely you will come to me. That's the key thing. So it doesn't matter. If you're an atheist and you hate God, please hate God with all your passion. Don't be wishy-washy about it. Be committed. And if you love God, then love God with all your passion as well, with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, every part of you. It says next here in the Bhagavatam, if even only once or even by force one brings the form of the Supreme Godhead, Krishna, into one's mind, one can attain the supreme salvation by his mercy, just as Aghasura did. What then is to be said of those who have placed him in their heart and always think of his lotus feet? He is the source of transcendental bliss for all living entities. And by his grace, the illusion of this material world is completely vanquished. What does it mean, the illusion of this world is vanquished? It's an interesting statement. What it's saying is this. You've heard of the matrix. You've heard of this idea of Maya, illusion. That Maya, that illusion, that matrix, that sense of bewilderment about what's going on in this world, that illusion vanishes. And now you can see things as they are. You begin to understand that everything that is happening in this world is part of literally a drama that is unfolding in front of us. You begin to realize that I'm a spiritual being and I'm here in taking part in this whole drama, but none of it is eternal. All of it is temporary. All of it will pass. None of it ultimately matters. Unless you make it matter. Unless you take it to heart. Unless you believe in it. And we're all caught up in the game, because what you're seeing here is like a video game, right? And when you watch a video game, you know, oh, this is just a video game. I know that. But a truly enlightened being knows that even this world is like that video game. And there is no difference. It appears real. It is so beautifully made, such an incredible video game, that it appears to be so convincingly real. Yeah, you hit something, you get hurt. You bang your head on something, or or a car or this or that, an accident or whatever, and you get hurt and you even die. But that's the nature of how convincing it is. Scientists have seen beyond what your eyes can see. They've gone beyond that with the electron microscopes and with MRIs, with all of that. And they've gone and seen that what lies behind everything is just atoms, protons, quarks, and all of these particles. And these particles are moving around in space. They represent not even 1% of what you see. The remaining is just space, empty space. That's what's all around us. It appears solid, but it's empty space. That's the illusion. That's what is completely vanquished when we receive His grace. So therefore, one who is an enlightened being sees beyond the illusion of the world. For him, that bubble has been burst. So back to our story. Parikshit, the king, has been listening to this whole thing being presented by Shukdev, and I'm going to show you some of the pictures of that. Let's get over to it. So Shukdev has been talking to Parikshit, and that's kind of the scene. I think you might need to go to the next one for those of you that are on Instagram. Right, so the sage Shukdev is there. He's the bluish looking person. That's because he's a very highly enlightened being. That's how they show him. And the king Parikshit is there sort of kneeling and asking questions. So that's the sort of background in which the Bhagavatam is taking place. So King Parikshit inquires, "O great sage, how could things done in the past have been described as being done in the present? Krishna performed the pastime of killing Aghasura when he was 5 years old. How then could he and his friends have narrated this incident to their parents a year later as if it happened recently?" Parikshit is confused and he doesn't understand. So there's a secret behind this. "O greatest of yogis, my spiritual master, kindly describe how this could happen. I am very curious to know about it. I think that it was nothing but another illusion due to Krishna." He knows Krishna can create all kinds of illusions. So when Shukdev hears these words and he hears this question, he's literally loses consciousness. Literally loses consciousness. And thereafter, with great difficulty, he revives himself and continues speaking to the king about Krishna Katha, about these pastimes. Shukdev says, "O best of devotees, most fortunate King Parikshit, you have inquired very nicely. For although constantly hearing the pastimes of Krishna, you are perceiving his activities to be newer and newer." So here's one of the very interesting statements. These pastimes have been spoken thousands of years ago. Some say that the Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago and these things were written at that time. Some say it was 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Whenever it was, these narratives have gone on since that time. They've been recorded in the Bhagavatam. They've been recorded in the Vedas. They've been talked about again and again. I have read these texts over the last 40 years, in this lifetime at least. And what he says is so true. Every time appears to be newer. Every time it appears like I'm hearing it for the first time. So he says, you are perceiving his activities, Krishna's activities, to be newer and newer. And that's the beauty of this. You know, you could watch a movie once or twice or thrice. 10 times? I don't know. Some people have the capacity to do that. I don't. But the pastimes of Krishna, you could hear them hundreds of times and they'll never get old. Yeah, the same basic story, but you'll get newer insights. You'll have newer perspectives on it. And that's the beauty. When you have something that is spiritual, it is actually eternal. It comes from that same eternal place as the soul. The name of Krishna, for example, can be chanted again and again and again, thousands of millions of times. You will never get bored. In fact, the more you chant it, the more it will cleanse the impurities within your heart, and the more it will bring you closer to God. You will find the anarthas, the impurities within yourself, dissolving. It's such a powerful thing. And you will develop a greater sweetness, or rather a greater taste and a greater appreciation and a greater sense of connection with that name and with the pastimes as well. So there's something magical about what you're hearing that goes beyond any worldly story or beyond any worldly name. It is of a different dimension altogether, and therefore it holds great power within it. What you are hearing is enough to transform your life forever. You may not realize it. It may not make any sense to you, and that's okay. Please ask questions if it's not making sense. If anything is not, clear, do not hesitate to ask, either now or in the comments later if you're listening to it at some other time. So the sage Shukdev says, Paramhamsas, or great devotees, are attached to Krishna in the core of their heart, and he is the aim of their lives. It is their nature to talk only of him at every moment, as if such topics were newer and newer. They are attached to such topics, just as materialists are attached to topics of the opposite sex, and sex itself, of course. O King, kindly hear me with great attention. Although the activities of the Supreme Lord are very confidential, an ordinary human being is unable to understand them. I shall answer your questions because spiritual masters explain to a submissive disciple even subject matters that are very confidential and difficult to understand. So now we go into the secret of what happened. After saving the boys and calves from the mouth of Aghasura, Krishna brought them all to the bank of the river Yamuna and said, My dear friends, just see how this river bank is extremely beautiful because of its pleasing atmosphere. See how the blooming lotuses are attracting bees and birds by their aroma. See, normal kids wouldn't notice this kind of level of detail. Krishna notices everything. He says, the humming and chirping echo through the beautiful trees in the forest, and the sands are clean and soft. Therefore, this is the best place for our sporting and for our activities. I think we should take our lunch here because it is very late and we are all hungry. The cowherd boys allowed the calves to drink water from the river Yamuna and then tied them to the trees where there were green, tender grasses. They then opened their baskets of food and began eating with Krishna in great transcendental pleasure. Like the whirl of a lotus flower surrounded by its petals and leaves, Krishna sat in the center, encircled by his friends who all looked very beautiful. Every one of them was trying to look at Krishna and hoped that Krishna might look at him. In this way, they all enjoyed their lunch in the forest. So I've got some nice pictures for you to look at here. Krishna sitting with his friends. They've got their food in front of them. All of them wanting to catch his gaze, all of them wanting to catch his smile. Like the whirl of a lotus flower, it says, surrounded by its petals and leaves, so beautifully described. So some of the boys ate from their baskets, their food baskets that their moms had given them, while others placed their lunch on flowers or leaves or fruits or barks of trees or rocks, and they imagined these to be plates as they ate their lunch. All the cowherd boys enjoyed their lunch with Krishna, sharing with one another the different tastes of the different varieties of preparations they had brought from home. As they ate, they laughed, and they made one another laugh. Krishna sat with his flute tucked to his waist on his right side and his horn and bugle and cow driving stick on the left, holding in his hand a very nice preparation of yogurt and rice with pieces of fruit between his fingers. He sat like the whirl of a lotus flower, looking toward all his friends, personally joking with them, creating jubilant laughter among them as he ate. At that time, the Devas, the residents of the heavenly planets, were watching, struck with wonder at how the Supreme Godhead, who eats only that which has been offered in sacrifice or yajna, was informally sitting with his friends and having lunch with them. While they were eating lunch, the calves wandered far away deep into the forest, being allured by green grass. Clearly they might have been tied, but they got away. When Krishna saw that his friends were frightened, they were, oh my God, where are we? Where are the cows? The young boys were taking care of the calves, right? These were all young kids. So when he saw that his friends were frightened, he said, don't worry. To mitigate their fear, he says, my dear friends, don't stop eating. I shall go and search for the calves and bring them back to this spot. Don't disturb your enjoyment. Now, Krishna actually knew something was going on, and he sort of wanted to set the stage for it. Don't disturb your enjoyment, he said. Then he took in his hand some yogurt and rice, rolled it up into a ball, and carried it with him. and immediately went out to search for the calves of his friends in all the mountains and mountain caves and bushes and narrow passages. Meanwhile, Brahma, the creator of the universe who resides in the higher planetary systems, had observed how Krishna had killed and delivered Aghasura, and he had been astonished. Now Brahma wanted to show some of his own power and see the power of Krishna. Therefore, in Krishna's absence, Brahma took all the boys and calves to another place and hid them. Remember, Krishna had left the boys and calves behind by the bank of the river Yamuna. So now Brahma gathered all of them and with his mystical abilities hid them somewhere. So as a result, Krishna was unable to find the calves. When he returned to the bank of the river, he was also unable to see the cowherd boys. He then began to search for both the calves and the boys as if he could not understand what had happened. When Krishna was unable to find them anywhere in the forest, he understood that this was the work of Brahma. See, Krishna is all-knowing. He knew exactly what was going on. In fact, I believe he even knew before he stepped away. He wanted to leave the space for Brahma to do what he was going to do. Anyways, thereafter, Krishna, the creator of the entire cosmic manifestation, expanded himself. So now he expanded. I was talking about mystical powers in the beginning. Krishna does something that no one has ever, no yogi can do, no one has ever done or can ever do or will ever do. Krishna, the creator of the entire cosmic manifestation, expanded himself into the exact number of missing cowherd boys and calves. How many were there? There were hundreds of boys, it said in the beginning, and there were thousands of calves. So he expanded into all of them. He became all of them. Exactly, with their same exact bodily features, their particular types of hands and legs and other limbs, their sticks and bugles and flutes, their lunch bags, their particular type of dress and ornaments placed in various ways, their names, ages and forms, and their special activities and characteristics. Having done that, having replicated identically all the boys and all the calves, Krishna entered Vrindavan as he usually did every day. So he went back home. Brahma had taken all the boys and calves and hidden them, and Krishna had recreated them in a moment and now went home with them. So each of these boys and each of these calves were expansions of himself. Right? This is a very important piece to understand. He then entered as the different calves and as the different boys into the different respective cow sheds for the calves, and the boys went to their homes. The mothers of the boys, upon hearing the sounds of the flutes and bugles being played by their sons, immediately rose from their household tasks, lifted the boys onto their laps, embraced them with both arms, and began to feed them breast milk. I guess they were being fed even though some of them might even have been younger than 5. Krishna was 5. But yeah. So that the breast milk flowed forth because of extreme love, especially for Krishna. Now, they did not know that these children that had come back were expansions of Krishna. In fact, they were Krishna himself, expanded into these different forms. So they were feeling more love than ever. They were already so in love with Krishna, but now he had come to them as their own child. Every one of them. Every one of the gopis, every one of these residents of Vrindavan now suddenly experienced Krishna as their own son. Krishna is everything, but at that time, expressing extreme love and affection, they took special pleasure in feeding him, and he drank the milk from his respective mothers as if it was a nectarian beverage. Krishna behaved exactly like each of the boys, enlivening their mothers with transcendental pleasure. The mothers took care of their sons by massaging them with oil, bathing them, smearing their bodies with sandalwood pulp, decorating them with ornaments, chanting protective mantras, and giving them food. In this way, they served Krishna personally. But you see how they took care of babies in those days, of young kids? Yeah, there was no iPads and there was no cell phones to give them. There was just these beautiful ways of caring for a child. All the cows felt the same thing. They mooed loudly, calling for their respective calves. And when the calves arrived, the mothers began licking the calf bodies again and again and profusely feeding them with the milk flowing from their milk bags. I don't know if you've ever been around cows, but you would be amazed at how loving they are. But now for them, their own calves were Krishna himself, and they were in love with Krishna too. And so when Krishna had appeared as their calves, they felt an immense amount of love. The gopis had always had motherly affection for Krishna, but now their affection for him exceeded even the affection for their own sons. Now the distinction between their sons and Krishna disappeared. This is that clear case of beginning to perceive God in everyone, in everything, in everyone, in the animals, in the humans, everyone. For 1 year, their affection for their sons increased unlimitedly, for Krishna had now become their son. Every day they found new inspiration for loving their children as much as they loved Krishna. In this way, Krishna, having himself become the cowherd boys and calves, continued his pastimes both in Vrindavan and in the forest for 1 full year. Now one day, 5 or 6 nights before the completion of the year, Krishna, tending the calves, entered the forest along with his elder brother Balaram. While pasturing atop Govardhan hill, the older cows looked down and to find some green grass, and they saw their calves pasturing nearby. So they came running down the hills, even though the sort of hill was rough, and they rushed over towards their calves. So Balaram saw this, Krishna's brother Balaram saw this, and he was unable to understand the reason, and he began to consider as follows. He said, what is this wonderful phenomenon? The affection of all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, including me, towards these boys and calves is increasing as never before, just like our affection for Krishna. Who is this mystic power? And so he began to think some mystical, power has come about and has made all this happen. She says, who is this mystical power? Where has she come from? Is she a demigod or a demoness? She must be the illusory energy of my master Krishna, for who else can bewilder me? No one can bewilder Balaram, Krishna's brother. Thinking in this way, Balaram was able to see with the eyes of transcendental knowledge that all the calves and Krishna's friends were expansions of the form of Krishna himself. He then asked Krishna, now I see that you were manifesting yourself in different forms as the calves and boys. Please briefly explain this to me. Krishna then explained to him the entire situation. Now, Brahma, for him, see, this 1 year that had passed was like a moment. When he saw Krishna engage just as before in playing with the boys and calves, he was bewildered. Brahma thought, whatever boys and calves they were, I have kept them sleeping on the bed of my mystic potency, and to this very day they have not risen yet. He had put them to sleep somewhere in some hidden place. And Brahma's thinking, now a similar number of boys and calves have been playing with Krishna for 1 year, yet they are different from the ones I have concealed. Who are they? Where did they come from? Brahma thought for a long time, trying to understand who was real and who was not real, but he couldn't understand at all. Brahma had wanted to mystify the all-pervading Krishna. He wanted to test him. He wanted to surprise him. He wanted to mystify this boy, whoever he is. So Brahma had wanted to mystify the all-pervading Krishna, who can never be mystified, but who on the contrary mystifies the entire universe. And now he, Brahma himself, was put into bewilderment by his own mystic power. As the light of a glowworm in the light of day has no value, the mystic power of an inferior person who tries to use it against the power of a person with greater power is unable to accomplish anything. Instead, the power of that inferior person is diminished. Then while Brahma looked on, all the calves and boys tending them appeared to have the complexions of bluish rain clouds and be dressed in yellow silken garments. They had 4 arms. So now, emerging out of those boys and out of the calves, he began to see these forms that were bluish in color and dressed in yellow silken garments, each of them having 4 arms, holding conch shell, disc, mace, and lotus flower in their hands. They wore helmets on their heads, earrings on their ears, and garlands of forest flowers around their necks. And they all appeared exceedingly beautiful. These were Vishnu forms, the forms of Vishnu. And Vishnu is known to be that expression of Krishna here, as you can see. This might be even clearer. All the boys and all the calves. Now Krishna is showing to Brahma, who is behind those boys and calves. All of these are Vishnu forms. All of them were smiling. And all beings throughout the universe were worshipping them. These Vishnu forms were all eternal, unlimited forms, full of knowledge of bliss and existing beyond the influence of time. Talk about mystical powers, right? He also saw at the same time all the calves and boys were expansions of Krishna. Brahma was jolted by astonishment and stunned by transcendental bliss and became silent. He was mystified. What is this, he thought. And he was not even able to see at this point. He became so overwhelmed and confused. Krishna, understanding Brahma's position, removed the veil of illusion. And Brahma came out of his trance and stood up like a dead man coming back to life. Opening his eyes with great difficulty, he saw the universe along with himself. He saw Vrindavan, the town, the place where he'd come, filled with trees which were equally pleasing in all seasons. Vrindavan is the transcendental abode of the Supreme Lord. This place, Vrindavan, exists right now in India, close to Delhi, 2 hours away. I love going there. So Vrindavan is the transcendental abode of the Supreme Lord, where there is no hunger, anger, or thirst. Though naturally inimical, both human beings and fierce animals live there together in transcendental friendship. Now, this is the spiritual side of Vrindavan. There is a physical reality of the town of Vrindavan. If you go there, you will experience at a subtle level all of these things, and at a physical level, you may see things that are not necessarily so pleasant. I remember an uncle of mine who once went there and said, well, all I saw there were pigs. And I said, oh boy, that's all you saw. Well, there are great souls who go and visit this incredible town of Vrindavan. All they see there is Krishna. They see him there to this day. Now, still, he never leaves there. It is said that Krishna never leaves the town of Vrindavan, that he is eternally there, but one must have the eyes with which to see him. So then Brahma saw the absolute truth, one who is without a second, who possesses full knowledge and who is unlimited, assuming the role of a child in a family of cowherd men and standing all alone, just as before, with a morsel of food in his hand, searching everywhere for the calves and his cowherd friends. Upon seeing this, Brahma hastily got down from his swan carrier, fell flat on the ground, like, basins, like you go fall down the ground like a stick, and touched the lotus feet of Krishna with the tip of his crowns. He bathed the feet of Krishna with his tears of joy. These are some pictures that will help you see that. This is Brahma. He's known to have 4 heads. Then rising very gradually and wiping his eyes, Brahma looked up at Krishna, his head bent low, his mind concentrated, and his body trembling very humbly. With faltering words, he began to offer praises to Krishna. So I'm going to leave those prayers and those praises for next time. And I'd love to know if there's any questions you guys have. Anyone here? We've had a lot of people from Instagram. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your presence. And I've had some folks here on Zoom as well as on YouTube. So wherever you're watching, whether you're watching the live or whether you're watching later, please know that we're here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in India, then it's on, so this is what I told you was Tuesdays, right? And then if you're in India, then it's 7:30 a.m. on Wednesdays, all right? In the US, Tuesday at 7 p.m., right, Pacific time, or 10 p.m. Eastern. In India, that becomes Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. All right, so if you have comments and questions, please ask. I'm still here. I can be happy to answer you. I would love to take your questions. I'm sure you have some. If you don't have anything right now and you think of it later, all of these sessions are recorded and kept on Instagram as well as on YouTube. You will find recordings for all of them. I have maybe Probably 80 or so sessions already recorded and placed on YouTube, but not as many on Instagram. So if you want the entire thing, the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll find a treasure trove on YouTube. All you've got to do is type in either my name, Rohit Juneja, or type in Spiritual Wisdom Academy, and you'll find all of them. So I look forward to reading your comments there. Please like, subscribe, and so on. But yeah, if you've got anything right now, anything burning in your mind or heart, if you're wondering how is this possible, if you're wondering anything at all, please feel free to ask. All questions are welcome. So is there anybody? Anyone at all? No? All right. Maybe you need to digest this. Maybe you need to think it over. But thank you so much for being here. Honored to have your presence, and so delighted that you were able to support me in this way. And please join me again. I look forward to seeing you again. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna.